Magic the Gathering has seen potentially its biggest transformation occur across the past 2 years, with world events, internal growth, and a changing player base all contributing to the game it is today. So, after 2 years and 100 episodes of this podcast, how have we changed with this game? And what does our relationship with it look like moving forwards? Welcome to Magic the Flavouring, the Magic the Gathering podcast, where we talk about all things Magic flavour design and lore. I'm your host, Andy Mann.
Hello, this is Nathan Cancel.
Episode 100! All the annoying noises.
Oh, yeah.
Set them all off.
Oh, yeah.
Triple digits, baby. Triple digis.
Didn't even break a sweat.
Can you believe that? Can you believe that?
It is very strange, right? I mean, if you consider, even if it was like if we did do the one per week, that's like 2 years, nearly. And it wasn't. We had some delays, so it has been like 2 years.
Yeah.
Which is that kind of blows my mind more than 100 episodes, because 100, once you get past like 20 or whatever, it's like what I imagine what like big YouTubers feel like, right? You know, when that sub number starts ticking up into like 5 digits and 6 digits and stuff. It's like, how do you even comprehend that without like it breaking your brain, right? For me, it's like the longevity. Like 2 years doesn't sound that long, but in the grand scheme of things, especially over the last years and everything being quite intense and a lot of stuff happening, like that to me is quite impressive.
We published our first episode. Episode 1, what is flavour? On January the 9th, 2020. And I'm sure people have who are long-time listeners of this show, we can say long-time listeners now, it's been on for a long time, have probably heard us talk about the fact that we recorded, I think it was like maybe the first 4, maybe 5, before we released any of them. Because I seem to remember when we were doing research about like, how do you even do this kind of a thing? You know, this is pre-COVID as well, so like the uptick in this kind of media, like although podcasts are obviously huge and have been for quite some time now, like obviously COVID had another little renaissance for it all. One of the big advices I had found was that you record several, because then you find a rhythm and then you release maybe 4 in a first little glut. And then by the time people like your thing on the first one, you might go and re-record the first one, which is actually something we did. So we actually recorded the first episode twice, and that was the one that we were kind of happy with. You kind of get your little rhythm going even kind of before you start. January the 9th, though, is when we released it. So yeah, we released the first 3. So what is flavour? Throne of Eldraine, flavour review, and the first is the worst. Eagle-eyed people might spot that for some reason on our podcast provider, episodes 3 and 2 have always been flipped around, and I have no idea why. But on our little thing, episode 3 comes second and episode 2 comes third. I've tried to change that. I have no idea how to change that. I don't think I can. But yeah, wild, yes. Absolutely wild.
Do you think if we redid like the first 5 episodes again, do you think in the last 2 years that the identity has changed enough that we'd have to kind of relook at a lot of things? Like, so I haven't rechecked the script out. And weirdly enough, which is really tragic, I think I've lost like most of those initial scripts from the first like year of recording, which is actually a shame. I hope you have them archived somewhere.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, yeah, so when we first started this podcast, we used to quite heavily outline things that we were doing, because we were also doing episodes. We kind of wanted to get like the bedrock of flavour episodes out there. These are things that other like content creators have also done, but we wanted to do like one big episode on each colour, for example. And then at the same time that we were doing that, Throne of Eldraine and Theros Beyond Death were kind of big, and so we did full set flavour reviews of those whilst doing these big colour episodes. And it wasn't until about maybe episode 10, which was Walking with Flavour, on February the 18th, 2020, where we started to kind of break out and do those more like nebulous episodes. But for the first sort of 9, I think 9 was State of the Story, so that was like our bedrocking of where we were at with Magic narrative specifically. But yeah, our first 9 episodes were all colour breakdowns, story breakdown, and kind of what the fuck are we going to be talking about for the next 2 years, you know? And so they were very heavily scripted, and, you know, go all the way to episode 100 today, where we have no outline whatsoever, because today it just doesn't need it for today. Today we're going to be talking about things far more nebulously, and then everywhere in between, obviously. But yeah, I think if we were to go back and redo those colour episodes, I think a lot of things will have changed. I remember, I haven't actually listened back to it in a long time, but I remember in the first is the worst, White, it was just as Theros Beyond Death was breaking, and we'd already seen like a few big cards from that set. I think we'd seen Heliod, the new Heliod card from that set. And
Mm,
so I remember distinctly saying something along the lines of, this is what White is. However, with a new set breaking, I can't wait to see what Wizards potentially does with this color. And obviously, in the
mm,
past 2 years, White and Red indeed has had a huge revamp. So I'm sure maybe our like, where could this color improve and go bits would be different. But I still think
mm,
the philosophy of those colors would be the same, because they have stayed true to what they've been doing. Red is the color of passion and impulsivity, and White is the color of structure, law, and oppression. So
mm.
yeah, I wonder. I don't know.
Yeah, I think the interesting one was out of the last 2 years has been Strixhaven, right? In terms of the one set that's really tried to like reverse an expected play pattern of color combinations. I
Mm,
think the blue green Quandrix was the only one that didn't really subvert the expectation too much, and I feel like they did have some serious contenders for like outliers, like things like Osgear. Like I played the other night White Red Reanimator, and it felt like I was playing Control Reanimator in colours that are normally, slap face with 6/1s and stuff like that. It was really
mm.
interesting to see that they're not necessarily breaking the colours, but they're definitely giving the colours more breadth. Because we did everything kind of as a comparison to like, this is what it was like in alpha. And sometimes it even seemed like in alpha colours could do more or have more interesting effects, even if it was like, effects that don't necessarily fit in today, like, protection and land destruction and stuff like that. So I think it's good to see in the last 2 years that, yeah, they do seem to keep trying to, I guess, reinvent the wheel is the wrong word, but there is this idea of consumer fatigue, right? If you don't continue to make the toys all bright, shiny, and new and doing something interesting, you're gonna lose interest, right? Which is
Mm.
something that Magic somehow managed to get away with almost every set, of where they have to kind of reinvent what Magic players want to see. And there's only so many times. It's like fashion, right? I guess like fashion never goes out of fashion. It's a different type of fashion.
Yeah, the 90s are very much back in. Have you noticed?
Yeah, it's really strange because I didn't think there was anything good about the 90s.
Oh, I wholeheartedly disagree. Like, I love the
I mean,
90s fashion. Like,
stylistically, some
no, I
I
love
don't
it.
miss those
I'm so
feeler
happy it's
trainers or
back.
whatever they are. Oh god.
No, I love it. I love everything about it.
Actually, do you know what I say
And
that? I'm literally wearing these unless you tracky jockey. What am I talking about? I am literally living it. Oh shit. Oh, I'm such a
no,
hypocrite.
I'm very happy the 90s are back. I'm annoyed that I haven't got any of my old clothes. I mean, old from when I was like a child and a teenager.
Yeah,
There we go.
they wouldn't fit anymore, but
No, for sure. So I'm looking at the episode list now, and today we're going to be talking mostly about you, because this is also going to be your last episode with us for a while, because you're
Aye.
going on your travels. You're also taking a bit of a break from Magic because of you going on your way on your travels. But this is also just us having a little look over at our time on the podcast so far over the past 2 years. I said, I think it was either last episode or the episode before, that it was around episode 20 was when we started doing online records versus in-person records, because we used to record with just one Blue Yeti microphone in between the two of us, because it's got that kind of two-way mode on it, and then we'd just scream into the microphone and shout our opinions, and then I'd have to edit it over the course of like 5 hours trying to make a clean episode out of it before we found the online thing and we could do 2 tracks, and it was all a little bit like cleaner. Although I'm sure a lot of my earlier attempts at editing that just seemed way too sterilized. It's not episode 20 that happened. Whereabouts do you think it is hovering around there? What episode number was our last in-person one? If you could just off the
I'm
top of your head it.
gonna drift it a little bit later. I'm gonna say 24.
Episode 14.
Fuck off, really? It was only 14 episodes.
14.
Considering we did a chunk of those together at the beginning, that was only what, like then 10 weeks, like a couple of months maybe of doing it in person before we had
March 17th, 2020,
Ooh.
episode 14, Legendary Potential, where we look through what makes a legendary creature and also what creatures we would think in the Magic universe had the potential to be a legendary creature if we wanted it to be. Do you remember that episode at all?
I remember I remember the first half. I don't remember what we said for the second. But
I remember I talked a lot about Kuldotha Forgemaster and Underrealm Lich being ones that I could see, like,
yes.
if you staple a name onto those creatures, then they would absolutely be legendary, not just because of what they did, but because of what they represented in their like little sphere on the plane, you know.
I like that we've come back to this topic a few times, right? Because I listened about when we recently did the legends that felt lackluster, right? Looking at
Hmm.
the Brothers War coming out and Dominaria United, and characters we might see that actually get like a card that's worthy. And I think that's a big. I think that's been a big thing like recently. I guess the big thing that's happened in Magic over the last 2 years that we've been able to ride quite comfortably is that Commander baby. You know,
Yeah.
Commander
Oh yeah.
Commander is the format now, right? And for better or for worse, considering the other formats, but it's really kind of helped fuel a lot of what we do because it is first and foremost kind of like a flavorful format, right? It's not necessarily a spiky format. I mean, there is obviously CDH, which has its own creative and versus spike kind of debate. So I don't necessarily think the CDH doesn't have its own creative and flavor flair to it, but obviously that's much more geared towards winning. But yes, idea of like legends and how many legends you should have and whether legends live up to potential and what names you're putting into flavor text.
Mm.
When you finally give, as you said, the Rem Corrales kind of argument of like you're always going to let down some part of your audience when you finally give a name. Like this is kind of like fuel to our fire, and I think we've done these episodes quite a lot because they speak quite a lot and they're easy to engage with. But in terms of like legendary flavor, I think it's probably been one of our easiest pools of topic, I think, over the last few years.
Oh
And I think
yeah.
it's one of the best things I like, I think, in sets. So I was trying to think of this earlier. I was thinking, oh, if you start asking me like, oh, what's your favorite set? What's been your favorite set? And I usually think I like sets with like rigid structure, like rigid like faction structure, usually 3 color blocks. So I really like Talara, really like Tarkir. I'm a big fan of Ravnica in the way that it structures itself as well. I think a lot of that comes I like this idea of cycles of like multicolored like legends and having each faction kind of be identified with these legendary figures and the way that they represent their houses. Say for example, like with the dragons from Strixhaven, or the progenitors from Ravnica. That kind of idea.
Mm.
Like it's going to be really exciting seeing the demon bosses. Going into New Capenna, for example. Especially since they're going to be like 3 color kind of legends. And I just think that's kind of where our flavor, I think the biggest pull from Commander comes from, right? Is identifying and throwing yourself behind a random legend and trying to make that legend sing in the best possible way, and then building the
Sure,
rest
like
of
a
the deck
legend, or
around it.
indeed like a tribe that's maybe not as represented, or maybe a little bit janky. I mean, we played some Commander last night at time of recording, and I think in the game you were the only person who didn't have a tribal deck per se, only because your 2 tribal decks, elves and goblins,
Mm,
they're not tribal decks.
no.
Like they're decks which the tribe just does an incredibly powerful thing. But we had like a zombies deck and a vampires deck and my werewolves deck, and you played like Eggley, which has like which I guess all commander decks are really tribal if you broaden the term out a little bit. We've spoken about this as well, like tribal between like keywords or whatever.
Mm.
But yeah, I think you're right. Having like you do tend to go towards those more structured sort of sets. I mean, you did miss out a Courier for your 3 color structured set.
That's funny because that's one of the ones that kind of I apparently just didn't hit home enough. Because I was thinking about this as well. I was thinking one of my earliest memories of like cards that I really enjoyed and had a bit of affinity to for no reason. I have no idea why. Were the Talus cards from like back in the day? What set we're looking at for Talus? Talus Airship, for example, was Portal Second Age. So this is like going all the way back to '98, right? And Talus Airship is just a 3/2 flying airshipy kind of card, art by Mark Tedden, and still one of my favorite cards. I like it because the cloud effect from the artwork kind of swings into the oil effect that's on the outside of the blue cards, as we've
Sure.
talked about in previous episodes. And like Ikoria also had that, right? It also had that kind of feeling of like airships, and it kind of felt like a little bit Mortal Engines-y kind of thing. And I don't know why, but I feel like Ikoria just tried to do so much. I think we said this in the episode, when we talked about
Mm.
the episode flavor-wise. It just tried to do so much. It just kind of lost its own identity in all the bullshit. Like
In
one of
one
the
block as
coolest,
well.
yeah,
One set, sorry, not one block.
yeah, one set exactly, yeah. And like even one of the best things, I think one of the coolest ideas was this companion idea, especially for like Commander, even if some of them specifically didn't work or were pre-banned, literally RIP.
Hmm.
They've literally had to ban like Lurrus from absolutely every format apart from Vintage. I think now is the only format you can play it in.
Yeah, the latest ban
You're
announcement, Lewis is gone from modern.
yeah, it's just stricken from the animals, and that's after nerf. It's the only like mechanic that got nerfed and got given like it costs 3 more to play this mechanic, and still wasn't nerfed enough. So I feel like they did so much. Like the idea of mutate was really cool, but it was very convoluted. The ability keywords and all that kind of thing. I just feel like it didn't have enough of an identity to keep it in my mind as being a plane I want to go back to. Right, we've talked to this a lot about how the humans came across and like the fascism of Dranith, and I feel like there's very few redeeming factors of the plane that kind of wants us to go back. Even like the big bad was just some random voice, right? There wasn't anything like going, I wonder who the big overlord. Yeah, that's felt like that was from another.
We still
plane
haven't had
as
a
well.
resolution to that, have we?
Nope, we're still not sure if it's Oko or if it was somehow Tezzeret, or we don't know.
Or
Again,
Tybalt or something.
Yeah, like how many of these are deliberately left as open ended that you can pick up anywhere, and how many of them have specific and deliberate drop offs and pickups down the line? We don't know yet.
I would love for that to be Elesh Norn. Like they just kind of retcon it a little bit, and although the characterization might not be on point, but it'd be just be like, oh, like they've been doing this all the way back in Ikoria. Yeah, it's funny that you talk about how like Ikoria didn't hit home for you. That second lore episode, so we split the lore into lore monsters and lore humans. At episode 20, where we do talk about the humans of Ikoria and specifically Dranith, and then the kind of Luca arc and General Kudro. That, for my money, is one of our best episodes in terms of looking really deep into the lore, and it was also lore that people, by and large, actually didn't really care for. And I don't know why I felt so strongly about like, no, there's a lot going on in Ikoria. I really want to do this episode specifically for the humans as well. The audio quality on that episode, unfortunately, is hot garbage. So that was episode 20. So we were 5 episodes into doing online recording, and it wasn't even the online aspect that fucked me over. It was the fact that I turned the gain all the way up on the mic, and because I didn't recognize it, I wasn't experienced enough to recognize it on the sound bars as we were recording, because we're using a thing called Zencaster, which is a few podcasters use. It's an online service, and you can see your little sound bars pop up, and it was just a big brick of soundbar, and I was like, oh, I'm sure this is fine. I don't know why it's doing that. It's because I turned the gain all the way up instead of all the way down on my microphone. So my voice is just all the way throughout the episode. I mean, people who listened to it and I asked directly about feedback as soon as I knew what I did told me that, like, yeah, obviously it's not great, but it's listenable too. And I think, I don't know how many other podcasts you listen to in your day-to-day. I listen to a lot of podcasts, and it's only in the past 6 months that, even after like a year and a half of pandemic, 2 years of pandemic, that most people are now kind of au fait enough with online recording. Like, I listen to so many different guest podcasts, and during that sort of little like middle 2020 to middle of 2021, like people's audio quality was like wild, but people forgave it, right? Because it's like, well, we're all doing this together. Yeah. So yeah, it's so funny. I think there's been wild swings in our literal audio quality for like quite a long time. I'm still not happy with it all the way. But yeah, it's funny, man. Like listening back to some of those episodes and being like, wow, like there's some really good shit in there. I wish people could actually hear it.
Yeah, I guess it's one of the kind of the proving grounds, right? Is you've got to kind of get yourself there technically as well as like creatively. Because I feel there was a lot of times that we were like not entirely sure what our I don't want to say like momentum, because I mean, because it's one of these things, right? If we always used to feel like we spoke at length, ad nauseum, if you will, about magic, and it felt right just to be able to at least publicize it in some fashion or another. And some weeks I remember it's just like, I'm so sick of magic. I'm so sick of consuming magic, of thinking, and do you know what's really funny? Like, because this is something I didn't really consider until, again, thinking about this episode, is that back in the day I was an obsessive little monster. I used to, on the way back from college, because I didn't necessarily have a computer at home, I would go to the local library and sit and draft up 60 card deck lists of like vampires when Zendikar was first dropping, like the original Zendikar. So I was like building up like vampire lacerators, vampire nocturnuses. I used to do this like avariciously. Like I wasn't playing with anyone, I wasn't doing anything with this. I was literally just going in and just drafting up deck lists. And nowadays, I barely have time to make alterations to EDH decks that I've spent money on buying cards for. You know, like
Yeah.
my engagement with the game is so much less like actively like needing, because it just seems to happen automatically now. Like it's
Mm.
surrounded me to the point of where I can't help but, like, before I even know it, I've opened my phone, I'm on Reddit, and I've punched it into and I'm in. I'm just
Mm.
scrolling through fucking spoilers and speculation and stuff, and it takes much less active engagement, I feel like. And if anything, I feel my need to engage with Magic is a lot less, because my accessibility and its engagement with me has increased so dramatically. Like, I play so much
Mm.
more now, and not necessarily immediately now, but I have played so much more in the last 2 years, to the point of where there were certain days where people were like, "Oh, anyone playing today?" And I'm like, "Oh, I might just have a break, you know, like
I mean,
my
Spell Table
wrists are
does that,
getting
right? You don't
sore, you know. Like,
you
there's
don't
only
have to
I
go down
can't.
to your LGS anymore. You can just sit on
No,
Spell Table. I mean, they
exactly.
just sit on Spell Table. Like, obviously, I think a healthy balance is healthy if you can. Obviously, not everyone can go to an
Mm,
LGS. Not everyone can use Spell Table either. But like, if you have access to both, like, I think a healthy bit of both is fine. I do know what you mean. I think it's also because when we were doing this podcast, when we started it, because we actively sought flavor in every aspect of this game, because it is an incredibly flavorful game. Go figure. We were doing things like, for every new set, we were doing like a build up to it. Like, oh, are we excited for this? We've seen some spoilers. We would then do the big world building episode. Then we'd do a mechanics episode. Then we'd do maybe an extra lore thing if it had a really interesting thing like humans, like a specific lore beat of the humans of Ikoria, or if it had sagas. We're still doing things like their own sagas episodes. Then we would do a storyline episode if it had narrative. And so, like, for each set, we were doing 3 to 4 to 5 sometimes episodes. And I think, although it's only maybe recently in the grand scheme of things that we've stopped doing that, things like mechanics, we could talk about mechanics every set and have something to say. We could fill an hour to an hour and a half talking about the new mechanics of each set. But sometimes you just kind of go like, well, like for Innistrad Midnight Hunt, we did that as part of our like flavor picks episode. Oh, we also used to do a
mm,
flavor picks episodes as well. So for every set, so it's but like I think we just went 10 minutes at the start of the episode. We went, these are all good. Yeah, blood tokens are very vampire. Yeah, they're pretty vampire. Okay. Anyway, flavor picks. You know,
yeah,
I
exactly.
think we've realized now that we don't necessarily need to talk about everything. Some things are just inherently there for people to see, and that maybe the mechanics out of all the things in Magic is just something that you can kind of anyone can look at and be like, I understand that Boros is the attacky one, so it's got the attacky mechanic. You're like, yep, that's
Yeah.
fine. And it's only if something really like jumps out and speaks to you then we need to kind of do that. But you know, that's a learning curve. And also secret layers. Like, we used to do one for every secret layer drop. Fuck
Mm.
that. Fuck
Yeah, it's
that
not
right
even
off.
feasible anymore. Like,
No, that's its own podcast. You could do
yeah,
that. We could do a sub podcast with just looking at secret layers every time it drops.
yeah. And the
Probably
thing
do
is, it's
more
now
episodes
got.
than we do now.
Yeah, yeah, probably actually. Yeah, like, the thing about secret lair drops, I find that they also, at the beginning, they kind of had to hit these big swings, right? They had to hit like
Yeah.
quite far. Whereas now because they've hit some quite far extremes. Now when they do the super drops, it's just like, oh, we'll just chuck some random stuff towards, like, nothing's like too out there, right? I think the last one was that weird golf planes that you peeled it off, and underneath there was it sounds awful. I hate the idea of it so much, even talking about it. You peel it off, and underneath there's like a battlefield forge, I think, and it's
Yeah.
all shiny. Ugh, it's disgusting.
How do
But
you
you know,
even
like,
do an episode on that?
without, I
Fucking
mean,
weird.
thankfully it's not a visual podcast, so they won't see us throwing up. They'll just hear it. But yeah, like, nowadays, like, even when they're doing things like the uh zodiac, you know, lands and things like that, it's going to take something extreme for me to be like, oh, okay, really really want to talk about it. It's like, maybe we could have done, say, like the Street Fighter one, because that is like, how are they porting another IP into and making it flavorful? But then what I've realized with Magic Mechanics is that you could do something so specific and just put the Adventure in the Forgotten Realm, you know, like, flavor keyword for the abilities
Yeah.
ahead of it, that you could just make any character from
Yeah, it's kind
anything.
of solved now, right? So we talked about that when we talked about Adventures in the Forgotten Realms. We did a big thing about like how that's amazing for the game in certain situations, and they cool, they've done it, excellent, blah 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 blah.
Mm,
Bish bash bosh, done. It's like we wouldn't do 10 episodes talking about like plains, like as in, or mountains. Do you know what I mean? Like, they've done the mountain, they've done the forest, they've done the island. That's it. It's done now. We don't need to talk about it unless we talk maybe specifically about like what is an island really. But then that's like one
mm.
episode. Do you know what I mean? So
Yeah,
yeah, I
exactly.
do know what you mean. Keywords have been solved. So unless they do something really drastic with it, we don't necessarily need to talk about it too much. Chun-Li's got
No.
multi-kicker. We always knew Chun-Li was going to have multi-kicker. Move on with our lives.
Yeah, yeah. I think also the interesting thing with sets these days is because we're not doing, and this is something that hopefully will change, because I think this is one of the things that's kind of maybe ruining Magic, like not subtly but also kind of obviously, is
Oh,
that
here we go. We've avoided saying this kind of shit for like literally 100 episodes now. Now
yeah,
we're
well,
like
it's time
brass
to
tacks.
look. I'm dropping mic and stepping out now. But it's we've did away with blocks, man. There is no time to sit and ponder anymore. The hype train is not only stuck in full gear for every other aspect of the game, it's now in terms of our settings as well. And I feel like there's only so much you can keep this up before it starts getting really difficult to have every set have its own hook, have its own distinct art style, its own 4 different alt arts. Like we talked about this, and this is something we kind of avoided talking about for a while, the alt art discussion. But we kind of felt it in Innistrad of where you had all of these cool different borders, and then for some reason Dracula as well. Instead of leaving that to the secret lair, which you also did extra secret lair for as well. So instead of leaving it there, you added it into the set. You had that kind of similarly with fucking Kamigawa, of where I really like all the different art styles. Like I've actively bought like foil versions, which for me is like sacrilege of specific cards because they just look so fucking good in foil. But again, you've got so many different art styles. You've not just got a Boseiju, you've got Boseiju with this artwork, and you've got the alt art full art stretch border. This idea of where you can't keep doing this to every single set to make each set outshine the last one. It's like the basic, like all of these things are all kind of tied in together, right? Of where the full art lands. How do you keep making different full art lands that people want? Well, these ones are now Japanese with traditional Japanese styling. It's like, cool. Well, then how are we going to make the next one? Well, these ones are in space. Oh, okay. Well, then how are we going to make the next? And this is where I feel like it's great, but we're going to really feel over the next year or so, which is again why maybe I'm not too upset about stepping away, because I feel like this might be the right time to do so anyways, that the pace with them trying to keep the profits up from a Hasbro point of view, and then the pace of us going through the planes from a flavor point of view, it's just so intense. It's like never getting to dilute your squash. You're just having a shot of Robinson's peach and what is peach? Is it just peach? Peach and apricot. I don't know why. And there's one of summer fruits, and then Ribena, and then before you do it, you're chewing on some coffee granules that aren't water. It's like, and it's just too much. It's just too much. So I feel like this is where they need to breathe a little, right? Just breathe a little. They nearly did it with Innistrad, but then they made the 2 different sets have their own distinct different things and borders and stuff as well. So even that didn't
But
quite work.
I think that's the middle ground, though, isn't it? I think that's maybe what they're trying to do. So they did it a little bit, a teeny weeny, all the way back. I think this was more of a narrative thing where you had Ravnica Allegiance and Guilds of Ravnica, and then like War of the Spark was its own set, but because it was still set on Ravnica and directly narratively followed the other 2, it felt like a 3-set block, even though it really wasn't. And they've done the 2 Innistrad sets, although they released them in the same sort of like quarter period, if that makes sense. They just did like a very sort of quick double release. And then this year, we're doing Dominaria United into Brothers War. And I think this may be this is them testing slightly different ways of doing 2-set block structures, because I think it's kind of universally agreed, although obviously not really universally, but I think it's mostly agreed that 2-set blocks are
Are
actually
you
not
stating
a bad
universal
thing.
agreements?
No, well, obviously not. For those people that are like 3 sets is too long because I don't want to be spending 2/3 of a
The
year
whole
in one
year, right?
place.
Even
And
sometimes,
for people
it's
that are
not.
like 1-set blocks are ridiculous because, like you say, you bounce around. The 2-set block structure makes sense for like a breathe in and a breathe out is what we always kind of say on this
Precisely,
podcast.
yeah.
And to have Innistrad I'm calling it double feature, obviously not the product, but like the way that they did, werewolves and vampires, and it did have a shared narrative, but they were their own sort of flavor and feel. And so the same thing will happen with Dominaria United and Brothers War, where they will have the same plane and a lot of the same themes, because Dominaria is as Dominaria does, but Brothers War is obviously going to be a set in the past, so it's going to be recognizable, but whilst having a completely different story and kind of feel to it, but it will be recognizably the same plane with the same kind of like through line. I wonder if that's the middle ground, and I'm sort of up for it. You still have the problem of having a bajillion different like mechanics per year and so many different set symbols, it hurts, and just things like that, but you do then get to settle in a bit. I'm really looking forward to Dominaria United Brothers War. I'm not even that big of a Dominaria fanboy. Like, the set Dominaria was obviously great in its own right, but in terms of the plane and the story, obviously it is magic. Like, it is magic, that storyline. But I'm not that fussed. But I'm really looking forward to seeing them do, this is the, like, where the plane is now. How do we go back to the past? And is it going to feel like we've been on this plane for a good amount of time before we leave it? Or is it just going to feel muddy and wet? And I don't really know. I don't really know. But I'm looking forward to seeing it.
Yeah, same. I guess that's the kind of thing they have to solve, right? Is it's not just it's keeping the format or the structure fresh enough that you're not just doing return to sets, because only so often you can return to a set before that gets tired. We're kind of running out of sets that haven't had a few returns to. Alara, I think, is the next one in terms of people going, okay, well, this is the one that you have no reason not to go back to. I guess we're going to go back to it eventually. But then also in terms of like big bads, as it were, like we haven't seen a big arc, a big new arc, as it were. We know the Phyrexians are coming back, but at that point, you've kind of done the Phyrexians more than once. You've given them their big break comeback, and for what we assume is defeated. I guess the opposite is that the Phyrexians win, and the next 10 years of Magic is like Phyrexian Magic,
but then,
which would be that would be really interesting.
It would be interesting, but I sort of feel like we forget Nicobolus wasn't just contained to the Bolas arc from the Gatewatch Fords. He's been a big bad in Magic for a long time.
That's what I mean. So, yeah, but again, so we did the big Nicobolus coming back, and then kind of defeated, pretty much put on ice. Okay, yeah, giving him a backdoor option if we need to go back to him. They'll do the same thing with the Phyrexians as well, because all you've got to say is that, oh, the oil got to one more plane that they haven't managed to vanquish them from yet, right? But after those two, apart from bringing back the Eldrazi, which I think won Eldrazi fatigued, and technically they kind of came back once already anyway with the whole surprise Emrakul kind of thing. I feel like that at that point they have to either invent new big bads, which every game, every fantasy world needs kind of anyway, or they have to set up, I guess, the thing that we haven't looked at, which they probably will do because they keep copying off of it anyway, is the anti-Gatewatch, right? They maybe create this like Legion of Doom that can then fight against the good guys after their victory against the Phyrexians, and maybe that's a nice feud, because that can happen across multiple planes at that point, right? This big battle thing, and maybe then the planes can be slightly more of a backdrop, which I know people have an issue with, but then it means that they don't have to go deeper into it. This is the thing, you've got to balance how much story you've got available to your planes with the characters and the stories you're doing it with. This is the thing about Ikoria, looping back to that initial conversation, is that Ikoria, the plane itself, is dull as fuck. It wasn't, but as in like it was so such a smorgasbord. You couldn't pick any individual thing out.
It was all just like natural triomes, wasn't it? And with a city,
yeah,
and there was another floating city. But yeah, people like big hubs of like characters, and Ikoria was very sparsely populated, and the only people that the only like major power on that plane were either humans, which people are bored of, or monsters. And the whole thing about the monsters is that they were incredibly diverse. It's like, well, you can't latch onto anything weirdly then.
No, exactly. It's like, which one's this one? Is it a cat nightmare beast, or is it a beast nightmare dinosaur, or is it a dinosaur? Is that no one cares anymore?
No one cares.
Stop doing it. But like the actual story was really really good to invest in. Like I really like the journey of Luca. We've spoken about this for a while. I think he's probably my dark horse in terms of like my favorite walker, because I think he's kind of like similar to Sorin in terms of you don't know exactly, like he has questionable intentions and motivations and that kind of thing, but you can kind of still somewhat sympathize with him. I feel sorry when obviously went leaps and bounds in the last block to kind of win himself back round.
Do you know how much in the minority within the Magic community, not just the Vorthos community, but the Magic community, we are with that? The fact that we have a bit of like investment or like a bit of intrigue into Luca's storyline, and so we've done multiple episodes looking at his representation as a tragic hero versus the representation of toxic masculinity versus the representation of a misunderstood like anti-hero. We are like the only people in the entire Magic sphere that give any sort of shit about Luca. That's
you don't need company to be right, my friend. You don't need company to be correct. Okay.
Oh man, it's the children who are wrong.
Yes, exactly. You know, like I feel he has such a wealth of potential sympathy, or just walking that line, right? It's quite nice to see someone who could potentially do good who just constantly falls into the bad side of things. I don't know, that seems way more compelling than Elf who likes nature, you know, when you strip off all of the other parts of her personality that made her interesting because you're uncomfortable with representation and diversity. Good job, Wizards. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like he's cool. He's got option. You know, it's very easy. It was very easy for Magic to spend a long time being very two dimensional, right? And now it's throwing so many things out there. It kind of needs to give everything a bit of depth. We've seen them fuck up with things like Killian, and kind of trying to give representation without actually doing the research. We've seen the lengths they've gone to with Kamigawa to kind of really dig in and go, no, we can actually get to the true representation of culture, you know, and not misrepresent it, and do it in an effective fashion that actually sings and complements the plane, allows the plane to be more than just, you know, a cookie cutter expected. Oh, here is some swords and a kimono, and maybe there's some noodles in one of the artworks if we do food. Good job.
Yeah, exactly.
We've moved away from that, which is quite nice. So yeah, again, I'm interested. I'm really excited to see what the next year after this is going to be. Because again, I'm with you. I think this Dominaria United Brothers War is really exciting. My only concern is let's not do a timey-wimey stuffy thingy to try and, because that's my only concern is when we go to the Brothers War, are we going back in time to fix something, or are we literally just looking or finding something? I don't want it to be that. So what I really hope is that big gate thing isn't like a random like fucking actual Stargate that does like timey-wimey stuff. I'm hoping that we just go back in time and see some aspect of the story that we hadn't seen represented before that has ramifications in the future, instead of going back and changing something that then changes the future. So I'm hoping that's what happens.
Teferi needs to fuck off.
He needs to GTFO. He's so cool. He's so cool, but his abilities naturally break kind of storytelling, right? And that's the problem with Teferi, is he's really cool. Like his cards, you just can't make a Teferi card without it being a sack of shit that no one wants to play against, even though he's a really cool character.
He's a really cool character.
He's a really cool character.
Become a time traveler.
Yeah, you've just designed him into a corner, unfortunately. So yeah, I mean, I'm excited for this year because I think Nuka Pen in isolation can be fine. It's also nice to see Elspeth back again, because we've got confirmation of that. Maybe we're going to see some Calyx bullshit. Maybe we'll see some Obnixis, but we don't know yet. That's quite cool. And then again, yeah, if the next year after this is mostly dominated by the Phyrexian threat building and then building towards like a force against them, I kind of like that idea, because that's a year, right, of being able to build up something again. I feel that's where Magic was really starting to sing for me, was when we had these broad arcs that could bring in multiple things from multiple places. The whole Ugin and opening up, and the Eldrazi thing happening, and then Sarkhan's time travel thing and Target, like all of that all having threads together, and then getting to do the core. Was it M19 when we did the story of Nicol Bolas and we saw? Yeah. So all of that, that's where I really felt like Magic was really kind of going off properly. The problem was, I don't necessarily know if most of the audience was ready for it and invested in it. I feel like now people have been given a bad story, they'll be more willing to invest in that kind of story again. So I'd be interested to see that. I mean, they hooked us with a Tamiyo compilation, right? They know how to hit us in the gut. So I feel like they should by now know what story beats we want and how to handle it properly.
Yeah, for sure. Could you imagine if they gave the Nicol Bolas stories from M19 the same pageantry and like media coverage that they have done for all the sets since, say, like Kaldheim? Could you imagine like how big that Kate Elliott story would have been, and how invested people would have been if you had, like, you know, they did like a fucking cartoon or a comic, or, you know, they had
Ugin
like, you
and
know,
Bolas in the meditation realm doing like this weird swirly fight thing, and then they have the tagline, find out how it all began, and you're like, what?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh,
could you
man,
imagine?
that was so cool. Yeah, it was really understated, the fact we got Elder Dragons back again. You know, again, I guess it depends on how much we're throwing a bone to the OG players compared to the new players, because this is, I still think, where we maybe underestimate how new the audience currently is. You know, how every year, how many newer players are picking up the game that don't still have ideas of the old lore, which again is maybe why the Brothers Law is a perfect set to do, because again, it does the whole catch you up whilst also giving you a throwback as well, kind of like Kamigawa, right? Like, it had something for the new and something for the old, you know, so it didn't necessarily matter. And I feel like they kind of will probably still have to do this with most sets, or with some sets each year, is try and do that kind of throw forward, throw back, trying to keep everyone together, because it's 30 years, right? It's still 30 years, and you still want to play the nostalgia, but you still want to keep it new and shiny. And it's a lot of the more I talk about it, the more I'm proud of Wizards to keep this shit going on, because it's a lot of shit to balance, so they do it very well. For the most part, there are always going to be mistakes and stuff that happen, like the accelerated banning process. But again, it shows why focusing on a format like Commander that's non-rotational is probably better than the formats you constantly have to put loads of time and effort into cultivating into healthy formats, which sounds equally exhausting.
For sure. Well, like we've did this episode 100, just to kind of look back and look forwards and just to have maybe like a bit of a chat about ourselves. But I just, you're going away. This is it, episode 100. The Fox and the Moon is going to be waning out for a little bit.
Yeah,
when will he wax
until the new moon? Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I feel like, as I said earlier, I alluded to it. I think it's kind of a good thing. I feel there's been a lot of on a deeper level. There's been like some building fatigue, as it were, because again, there's just a lot of content to constantly be engaged with, and I find it very difficult. I see commanders that I want to build that I just don't have the time to build. I see all these different cards that I'll throw into a deck, and I don't play the deck for 3 or 4 weeks, and it gets to that point of where I'm not dissatisfied with Magic, and I don't feel the need now to kind of have my finger on the pulse all the time. And it'd be quite nice to take a step back and then come back and kind of see how everything is in a few months, and then maybe do it again for a bit. And maybe that might be the nice way to bounce back and forth with the game for a little bit before giving up all of my money to it once again. But it's been a really, really fun journey. I mean, it's been a really exciting time to be in a Magic content producer. Like, there's been so much happening. There's been so much to talk about. There's been so much engagement, so much conversation. In general, I feel like the nerdy things in life right now are kind of on a high. Everything from anime to Marvel to games. I feel like they're all kind of exploding in their own little way, which is a really nice thing for someone who's kind of invested in all those sides of things. But also, every now and again, you need to take a step away and have a breath, And I feel like that's probably going to be good for me. I'm going to miss it though. It's going to be really weird. It's going to be really weird.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm going to miss you too as well, man. I mean, obviously we're friends outside of this, and we have been for over a decade now. But for the past couple of years, this has been our main way to engage with each other, and just through this game or like through creating this podcast. And so, yeah, I'm going to miss you. I'm going to miss you terribly, dude. I'm going to miss you always.
No, it's going to be weird not having these lovely conversations, but hearing your dulcet tones.
I mean, we'll probably still have the conversations. I just won't be hitting a record buttons.
That's true.
All the weird episodes that people won't get to hear, like essentially episodes of Magic the Flavouring that are just going to be like, not recorded for public consumption. How weird is that?
Well, there's a joker yesterday. One of our the guys we play with, Dave, said, "What if you just like call me up in random places?" And I'm like, just like on a random street, with like a pinata behind me, drinking, pina colada or whatever, and being like, foreign flavor, like hot shot, and just had to do like little 10-minute drive-bys. Like, sorry, Addy, can't eat, break it up, buddy. Sorry, new legends look cool though. Speak soon.
If you want to do a Magic the Flavouring travel vlog and just take over our YouTube channel and just upload those every like couple of weeks.
Oh my god, that'd be amazing. I need to see what the scene's like. That's the thing. Maybe that's it. I start a new frenzy out in Mexico. Because I mean, the biggest question was, do I take any cards with me? And I think the ultimate answer is probably going to be no, because I trimmed a lot of stuff anyway. Unless I buy a couple like challenger decks or something like that, just to take out and have something to play with, which I might do anyway. But then that's just so dangerous to them being like, guys, have you heard of this cool format called Commander? I'm just going to have some boxes shipped. So
I don't think you'll have any trouble wherever you are in the world finding somewhere that's selling a couple of precons. You might have trouble finding ones in like English language, depending on where you are.
That's fine. I barely know what the cards do as it is. There's too many words written on them anyway, so I just ignore half of them regardless. It's just how it works these days. What does the card do? Just the first few lines. Well, we talked about this yesterday about that stupid fucking snake enchantment you played. Like, I was exhausted reading.
Oh, I played Shigeki from Kamigawa, and I played it. It was the first time I ever cast it, and then I was trying to think of my next play pattern, and I went, "Oh, actually, I don't even know what this guy does." Like,
what does it do?
I had an idea of why I slotted it in the deck. I was like, "Well, he's a legendary enchantment creature," and there's some stuff on there about him like getting lands, and and something. I don't know, but like someone pointed out that even before you get to the text box, there's already like 7 or 8 words like in his name and in his typeface. It's
Yeah.
like, what? I don't even know what this card does.
Yeah, it doesn't even matter anymore. The artwork's so good. This is the other thing, right? The artworks are so good and busy that you're like, oh, it doesn't even matter what the card does. Like how cool this card looks. What does it do? It doesn't matter. Look at it. It's so shiny.
There'll be an episode coming out in a couple of weeks' time, which I've already recorded with our friend Total MTG, and I think is it Total or was it Adam the Gathering? I don't know. I've recorded a couple of episodes in the backlog, and I was talking to someone about like how. Well, I just don't have time to do it every week, and I talk about how, I can't recite what any cards from the last maybe year and a half do, but I can tell you exactly who illustrated every single card.
Yeah, it's much easier to digest the art than it is the text box these days, which actually says a lot. That's a whole other thing, right? Like the weighting of art style to text box.
I mean, hey, for us, can only be a good thing. Can only be a good thing.
Can only be a good thing. Cool. Well, sir, is this it? Have we come to? And now the time has come. So
I think we've come to the end of our 100th episode. Well,
what a journey.
Thank you so much for taking this journey with me so far, man. You will be back. This isn't it. You are going to be back on the show when you come back from your travels. And we'll see if I can get some grainy, like off your phone recording from somewhere.
Off my phone, off my face. It'd be great. It'd be lovely. Drunken Mexican anguish over like, can you believe what they did to our boy Obnixilis? They made him Celestia. What the fuck?
Why is he in band colours? Why is he in band colours?
God damn it. Why is he marrying Elspeth? What's happening? Yeah.
Well, on that bombshell, if you want to message Nathan good luck and farewell, you can hit us up on our Twitter at mtflavouring. Emails go to mtflavouring@gmail.com. My personal Twitter is at AndyManface. Nathan's, yours is...
at the Fox in the Moon.
Thank you so much for listening so far. There are episodes going to be coming up for season 2, where it's going to be little old me chatting to some of our friends in the Magic community and maybe some new pals as well. But other than that, all that remains for me to say is I love you, Nathan, and thank you so much for listening. This has been Magic the Flavouring.
I'll see you soon.